Welcome to Your Dose of Wowness. Today, we've got 6 distinct anomalies where the physical world did something it absolutely should not be doing. Basically, 6 times nature broke its own rules. Now, one of these 6 mysteries has new evidence emerging every single year, and I'm telling you, it's the one closest to being fully solved in our lifetimes. You might not agree with my pick, but hear me out.
Okay, let's dive into this. We're doing a rapid-fire ranking today, going from the most explained right down to the absolute deepest unknown. So, our redacted dossier, it includes the sailing stones, the Bermuda Triangle, Fairy Circles, ringing rocks, the Taos Hum, and the Hessdalen Lights. We're taking all the evidence from the entire week and throwing it head-to-head.
Coming in right at the top, number 1, the sailing stones. This is our most explained anomaly.
Picture this. You've got rocks, some weighing up to 320 kilograms, just moving across a perfectly flat desert lake bed, and there are literally no footprints in sight, none. This mystery protected itself for 99 years, mostly by leveraging extreme geography and some brutal climate conditions. I mean, these stones sit out on Racetrack Playa, which is 40 kilometers from the nearest paved road. The movement only ever happened during this incredibly narrow, freezing winter window. The playa floods, it freezes, and then briefly thaws under the morning sun. Basically, it happens when absolutely no one is visiting. But finally, in 2014, a team of scientists actually caught them in the act.
I firmly rank this as the most explained because the solution is total. When scientists actually mapped this whole thing out, they found 0 seismic activity, no magnetic anomalies at all. It was just thin ice, a really light wind, and a shallow pond. Under the exact right morning conditions, these floating panels of ice get driven by gentle breezes, and they just push these massive stones right across the slick mud. A force so gentle it's essentially invisible completely solved a century-old mystery.
Moving down to number 2, the Bermuda Triangle. This is what we're calling the illusion.
For our runner-up, we've got a massive tonal shift. Instead of a single physical mechanism like the stones, we're looking at the anatomy of an illusion. It's a legend, and it built itself on real disappearances, sure, but also a huge amount of statistical distortion and deliberate myth-making. The core of the legend wraps around genuine atmospheric, oceanic, and geological conditions that are weird enough on their own. But when you actually look at the raw data, the rate of incidence is no higher there than in any other heavily traveled ocean region. It's a mystery constructed entirely by humans, not by nature.
Dropping into the middle of our ranking with number 3, Fairy Circles. These are almost solved.
Imagine a vast desert ecosystem completely covered in millions of perfectly spaced, totally unexplained barren circles. And this brilliantly illustrates how science builds on itself across generations. Way back in 1952, Alan Turing wrote this mathematical framework for how patterns form in nature. Fast forward 70 years, and modern AI pattern recognition applied that exact math to these massive ecological grids. So we now see that these circles are an emergent property of plant competition for scarce water. It creates this highly organized layout that Turing predicted decades before we even had the satellite tools to measure it globally.
Stepping over the boundary into the real unknowns at number 4, ringing rocks.
Welcome to a 7-acre boulder field where the stones literally ring like bells when you strike them. Now, we actually know the mechanism behind the sound itself. It has to do with internal stress and how the rocks resonate. But I place this at number 4 because science absolutely cannot explain the boundary. Within this exact same field, roughly 66% of the boulders ring. The other 34% totally silent. And here's the kicker. These rocks are indistinguishable. They have identical geological compositions, yet they act completely differently while sitting right next to each other. That boundary line just defies every current model we have.
Down to the 5th spot, the Taos Hum. This one is largely unexplained.
So this is a low-frequency drone, and it's heard primarily indoors, usually at night, by only about 2% of the local population. Look at the contrast here. Over on the left, we've got the Windsor hum. People there heard a massive, persistent vibration, and science easily solved it. It traced right back to an industrial blast furnace on Zug Island. But on the right, we have the Taos hum. Government-commissioned scientists brought in these highly calibrated acoustic instruments, and guess what? They detected 0 signals. Nothing at all. Yet the residents kept hearing the hum throughout the entire investigation. The evidence points to a highly selective human sensitivity to a real physical source that science just straight up cannot locate.
Which brings us to the absolute floor of the countdown. Number 6, the Hessdalen Lights, the deepest unknown. We're talking about an energy source in a central Norwegian valley that routinely defies the boundaries of known physics. And to be clear, this is not a local legend. It is hard data. In 1984, Project Hessdalen researchers, these are highly trained observers using calibrated instruments like radar and spectrographs, recorded 188 distinct plasma events in just 53 days. Instruments do not hoax.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the massive gap between what we can measure and where it actually comes from. The scientific instruments absolutely confirm the anomaly. The spectrograph definitively calls it plasma. But the origin of this sustained energy? Entirely unknown. We've got 3 leading hypotheses that emerged from the data, but honestly, none of them fully close the loop.
The strongest of these theories is the piezoelectric or geological plasma hypothesis. See, the valley sits on this fault zone that's just packed with quartz-rich rock. When tectonic stress applies pressure to those crystals, electrical charges accumulate and then discharge, ionizing the air and creating plasma. Sounds brilliant on paper, right? But here is the blunt reality. The energy budget just does not add up. A plasma structure glowing for minutes, sometimes hours, requires a massive, continuous input of energy. Tectonic stress alone simply cannot account for it.
So, pulling back for a second, just look at the spectrum of this explainer across the whole week. From the sailing stones perfectly solved, to the Bermuda Triangle largely debunked, fairy circles mathematically modeled, ringing rocks yielding a partial mechanism, the Taos Hum an unlocated physical source, and finally, Hessdalen, a complete energetic unknown. Science keeps almost solving these things, but the real mystery lives right in that stubborn gap between close and confirmed.
None of these 6 anomalies require the supernatural. They just require physics we haven't fully characterized yet, geology we haven't mapped, and ecology operating at scales we are just now learning to measure. As we've seen, the strangeness is not beyond nature. It is deeper inside it than we expected.
So, I leave you with this verbatim question. Do you agree with my number 1? Which mystery do you think is closest to being solved? Drop your verdict below, defend your ranking, and let's see where the consensus lands.
42 days. We have been exploring these topics every single day, every question taken seriously, every explainer built to go way deeper than the headline. Thank you so much for being here since day 1. And hey, if this happens to be your first explainer, there are 41 more waiting for you on the channel. The community we are building right here keeps this project alive, and it seriously means more than you know. Tomorrow we kick off week 7. We are pivoting away from nature anomalies to history's greatest vanishing acts, starting with the missing amber room, a massive chamber made entirely of amber and gold worth $500 million, stolen by the Nazis, and it is still missing. See you then.